here we go. Here is our if-then tree. Here's how it goes. Keyword if. If what? If var active layer, double equals. Remember, logical comparator that assesses equality, right? Does it actually equal what? K layer room. If var active layer equals the room layer, then we're gonna do something. And here's what I do. This is my practice. I hit return twice, and then I enter the keyword else if var active layer actually equals K layer displays. Keyword then, and then return. Else if var active layer actually equals K layer cameras, then, and I hit return, and then I entered the keyword end, and then again, this is my little practice, I put in dash dash if. Make a little comment to myself. What did I just end? I ended that big old if, else if, else if. Why did I do that? Well, as we get more complicated code, there's going to be lots of ends. And some of you are not going to take my approach, and you're just going to bang things out linearly, whereas I like to put in the structure and then come back and fill in the gaps. And those of you who don't do it my way, you'll probably wind up having, right, here's my code, okay, go, and it will break. And it'll be like, we're looking for an end. And then you'll type in end, and then you'll hit go, and it'll break. And you'll just sit there and you'll just keep entering ends until it finally goes through. I'm not going to model that for you. I like to do it like this. So now we have a little decision tree, Nate. If var active layer equals K layer room, guess what we should do?
We're going to turn that layer on. We're going to, light some candles, put on some music, get that layer going.
Oh, man. All right. We're going to turn that on. Then we're also going to do the same thing for B1 displays, and we're going to do the same one for C1. And poke that in and make those be true correspondingly. And there we go. That is func show layer. So down here in our event handler, we're going to run func show layer. How did I do that? I literally just said its name. Func show layer is the name of the function, and then double parentheses is the fact that I want it to run that function when it runs that line of code. If I don't use the parentheses, that means something, and we'll talk about that later. So there's that. That's func show layer. You know what? We're going to take a very similar approach here to function func interlock. Right? Here we go. Function func interlock. What are we going to do? We are going to I'm going to cut those out from down there, paste them up here. We're going to set all of them to be false. We're going to turn all of the Booleans false because we're going to turn around, and I'm just going to copy from up there in func show layer. I'm going to copy that same decision tree because we're going to just reuse that logic. And then we're going to turn around and turn right back on the correct buttons. So paste and get the right buttons in the right slots and make that say true and get your trues in the right spot. And there's that. So there's func interlock, very, very similar logic. We turned all of them off, and then we turned the correct one on. Nate, why didn't I smush those together into the same function?
Because maybe there's different things in this design later on that might want to change the layers or might want to change the buttons. They're not always married, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. When it comes to writing functions, part of the mindset you ought to have is every function ought to have its own very specific, distinct purpose. Because the most frustrating thing is to have a function that does 99% of what you want it to do, but actually happens to actually change things over here that you didn't want to manipulate. So yeah, just don't mingle them together. Keep them separated. So we have a function for working the layers, a function for working the buttons, and one last thing. Well, let's get that function call in there. Func interlock. All right, that's looking good. Nate, let's write function debugger.
Do it.
And in fact, I'm gonna tell you, let's hit pause for a second. You try it by yourself while I do it over here, and let's see if you can figure out how to do it for yourself. So 1, 2, 3, pause. Okay, did you get it right? I'm gonna write it now. Here we go. I actually am just going to take func interlock and paste that in, and I'm gonna change this to say func debugger because I kind of dig that. Func debugger. And what are we going to do? We are going to make it print and print and print. And so when it's on room, it's going to say room. And when it's on displays, it's going to say displays. And when it's on cameras, it's going to say cameras. And then down here in my event handler, I'm going to call func debugger. And I don't need that little line of code there. And so now look at your script, and you can see sort of what I was talking about. Our event handler is just really a series of function calls. Effectively, there's one line of code, right? One line of code where we're setting the var active layer, but the rest of it is us simply calling high-level, straightforward functions. And if you want to know the details of what's happening in the functions, you just go to the function definitions. But now it should be crystal clear exactly what that button's trying to do. When you poke it, you set the layer, and then you do some business about the layers, you do some business about interlocking, and you do some debugging. Should be really, really clear. And we're going to do our best to take this kind of approach as we move forward. Let's write the other two event handlers. Guess what? It's really straightforward from here. We're going to hit copy and paste, and we're going to update this. Actually, we should stop right here. Do you remember in the block controller, as soon as we duplicated an event handler, it got all mad at us and went blue and had up the chain link fence and everything? That's because it said you can't have more than one definition of an event handler. That was the block controller sort of being a nanny, okay? The text controller, UCI script, does not mind at all the fact that we have, at this particular juncture, we have basically defined what to do when you press that button 3 times. It only executes the last set of code because you defined it, you redefined it, you redefined it. So this is, right, so the block controller was nice. It was saying, are you sure? Because you're probably gonna, it's probably a boo-boo. Not a boo-boo, we're just in the middle of fixing things up. So let's change this button. This is btn nav displays, which means that the active layer is k-layer displays. Line 67, btn nav cameras, and the active layer is k-layer cameras. Hit save and give it a go. Look at that. Boom, boom, boom. That is totally working. The one last thing that I think we ought to add is we ought to start in a known good state. We ought to initialize the entire script. And here's how we're going to do it. We are going to write a function called func init. It doesn't need any arguments. And we're going to open and close it. And what are we going to do? We are going to set var active layer to be, by default, k-layer room. And then guess what? We're going to run those functions. Just like that. And Then we're going to call that function. In the main line. This code is in the main line of the script and will run one time at startup, which is exactly what we want. And if you watch here on the screen, what you'll see is that when I restart the code, it restarts in the room. Because who knows? Maybe there's a power failure. Maybe there's any number of things. But if we are coming back online for some reason, we want to start in a known good state. Here we are starting in a known good state. We're starting in our default state of showing the room controls. Again, why the room controls? For the same reason that we put them all the way on the far left. They're probably the first things that we're looking to manipulate.
Now, let me ask you this, Jeff. For people who have taken all three versions of this class, for the people who took the control components version, the fundamentals version, and they were able to add these interlocking buttons with a single component, and it took them 30 seconds to do it, what makes what we just did better than control components? It took us 80 lines of code or so to get 3 buttons that are interlocking. What is your argument that says, hey, this is better than simply stealing them from a selector?
Do you remember at the end of Back to the Future where they're like, Doc, but this road isn't long enough? And you remember what he said? And Doc says, it's okay, just get in DeLorean because where we're going, we don't need any roads. Because he gets up and he flies. Was it extra work to make the DeLorean fly instead of just driving down the road? Yeah, it was a little extra work. But what happens in the long run is that we're able to do extra things that are extra magical, extra easily. So it's a little more work on the front end, but it's going to unlock and open all of this sort of efficiencies as we move down the road.
Or above the road into the future.
Or above the road into the future, yes. Come with Q-SYS into the future.
I'm going to go back in time, and I'm going to marry your Meemaw, and she's going to start calling numbers integers, just for you.
Wow.